Right, good morning and welcome to you all. Thank you very much for joining us this morning. This morning's talk is with Lee. Give him a wave, Lee. So
Hello.
Lee has kindly agreed to join us and talk about her experience as a mother on probation. Now this, as it stands, is one of our most popular talks, so it's got people interested. There's some fantastic questions, and Lee's going to run through her experience of how things were for her. So as it stands at the moment, Lee's currently one of our experiential advisors on the EPOP project. So good morning, Lee, and welcome. Can you just give us a quick run through of what the experiential advisor role entails, please?
Good morning, Jamie. Good morning, everyone. So as an EA, what I do is I use my lived experience to go into probation offices and educate them on like the untold stories of someone on probation, the things that they go through and the processes, especially with things like the sentence planning and also the OASIS reports, the things that are in there, and doing things like role plays to understand from a person on probation's point of view, how those things help for rehabilitation.
Brilliant. So your experience of the system can help not only the people who are on probation, but can also help and support probation practitioners in their delivery as well.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Okay. So in terms of your own experience, Lee, you were placed into custody while you were a mother. How old was your daughter at the time when you were placed into custody?
My daughter was just about to turn 2.
Okay. And
so 2 weeks.
2 weeks prior to her birthday, that was?
Yeah.
Right. So in terms of, you and your experience, how did that feel as a mother? Because I would imagine, I've not been through that myself, but I would imagine that was a difficult period of time to deal with.
It was extremely difficult. However, I feel like my feelings towards that kind of was at the back of my head. I had a 10-week trial to focus on. So I had to find childcare for 10 weeks, which is the best part of 3 months. So I was already in a routine, and she was also in a routine where she was away from me. That makes sense. So I feel like in some ways it made it easier for the separation, but then the reality then made it a lot harder because I wasn't even going to get that routine again. So yeah, it was extremely hard to adjust to a different routine. As a mother, I had a routine with my daughter every day, like bedtimes, food times, and just your normal house routine. So
yeah,
that still being present in my subconscious but not being present in my physical was something that I really struggled with, and it created a lot of problems for me behavior wise while I was in the prison for the first few months.
Okay, so in terms of then, you obviously were placed into custody and your daughter was coming up to 2 years of age. You were released from custody, and how old was your daughter when you were released from custody?
She was also just about to turn 2 weeks before she turned 5 years of age.
Okay, so as a mother, you've missed the best part of 3 years of your daughter's life from the age of 2 to 5. So when you were released, in your own experience, what was your experience like of being a mother and returning to being a mother, and also then being released from prison and being on probation?
Okay, so the time I was released was just at the end of the the pandemic. So I had no contact with my daughter for the last year of my sentence due to the pandemic. So
that must have been tough.
Yeah, that was extremely tough. So coming out of that situation, I was trying to work out how is this going to work now? How am I going to build this relationship with my daughter, so to speak? So the question was, how did my experience go coming out of working with probation, right?
Yeah.
In that sense. So there wasn't much communication. There wasn't much understanding, first and foremost, that I had a child for some reason. And then there wasn't any awareness of where she was living, where she was going to be living. Like none of that was understood outside of my home, outside of my own family. Could you just ask me the specific question?
Yeah, so obviously it's a really difficult time for you. You've spent 3 years in prison, you've been released from prison, and you're now a mother on probation. So your initial, again, for you, you've got to think about where it is that you're going to live. And again, who was looking after your daughter at the time while you were in custody?
So my mum and my sister had my daughter while I was in custody for that 3 years. That was
Okay.
consistent. So I saw her very often. It was all good until the pandemic. So the pandemic
Okay.
changed a lot about the situation. So when I was released, I was housed. I wasn't housed with any support from probation, no fault there, because of the pandemic. I feel like a lot of these things were not really because I think
Was symptomatic
the
of the
pandemic
pandemic as well as
had a
anything else. Yeah.
contribution at the start of it.
Yeah.
So things like housing wasn't set in place. That's something I had to kind of navigate myself. So I was moved out of borough, which was quite hard. So I've just gone through, a prison sentence, also with the pandemic involved, and then I've been released. And it's like, there's your daughter, now just get on with it. Because the assumption that my mum had was that there was a plan in place for me when I'm released through probation. In her understanding, you're on probation, so they will support you, and that didn't actually happen. So I went for a lot.
In terms of you then, so you've gone from being in custody, you've now got your daughter back, you're living. So what did you, obviously for your daughter, she had to move from your mother's or your sister's back in with you. How was that relationship? How did you find that, and how did you feel as a mother having to rebuild that relationship?
I'll try and keep it as short as I can. So it was the most hardest thing ever. So when I arrived at probation, on the day of my release, I remember the conversation that we had was in regards to the people that was involved in the case that I went to prison for. My head was just like, where are we going to sleep tonight? Like, how is she going to react when I get to the door? Because every day for the last, I think, like 10 weeks, it was like, I'm coming home, I'll be home soon, I'll be home soon. Then it got to, you're taking long now, mummy. You're taking a very long time now, because every day you're like, coming home soon, I'm coming home soon. So in my head, I was so concerned about where we were going to stay and how that was going to pan out. And that was just my situation subconsciously in probation. And no one knew about that because no one actually mentioned that situation. It was more about, okay, the risk of probation. This is my first time. So I'm like, okay, maybe we'll talk about this next time. Maybe this will come up next time. So I remember getting home, and in short, my daughter didn't really understand that I was actually home permanently. So she was quite confused. I remember her going to stay with a family friend for a few days and coming back, I think the weekend, and I went to pick her up, and she was like, oh my gosh, mummy, I forgot you was here. It's just like, I think as also what's important to mention is my mental state and that transition and that routine that I was in. It was so hard to understand that I was still in that regime while I was trying to be a mom, while I was trying to focus, while I'm trying to just get up every day, while I'm trying to, my granddad had passed away 18 days before my release also. So I had a funeral that I came home to, 2 funerals, like my godmother also passed away. So there was a lot going on. So yes, having to hold that on my own, absolutely, it was quite hard. However, when you're translating some things on the via phone, I don't know, maybe it's the way I speak, it can sometimes sound like, okay, this person's got their stuff together, this person's okay. And on paper, that person's a low risk, without understanding the effects of a low risk in crime, and kind of means a high risk in community, because I didn't have that transition in my life ever. So yeah, that was kind of my experience.
And how did you feel going back into your daughter's life? Was it, did you feel like you'd let her down? Did you feel like it was a chance for a fresh start? How did you feel personally about that?
So when I came home, and obviously she was in my care, there was no conversation about where she was going to go. So when I came home, we got housed at 9 o'clock that night, and for a long time I felt like I did fail her. I felt like I wasn't doing good enough. I felt like a lot of the achievements that she had, a lot of the things that she was doing, I laugh now because the way I used to beat myself up about how bad of a mother I was, and like people are like, oh my God, you're doing so well. I'm like, it's not my work. Like, this is not my work. It was really, really bad. I used to beat myself up every day because I didn't really understand that I was going through like the missing of of her youth. So my sister started sending me pictures, for example, of her like when she was like 2 and 3, and it would like create a lot of problems. I'd be like, why are you sending me pictures of her? Like, I don't want to see pictures of her when she's. And I realized that that affected me more than I knew. So it was hard. It was hard. It was hard to try and explain what was going on for me around her. It was hard to deal with the mood swings because I'm a human, so I went through a lot of different emotions, and I had my daughter present. Do you know what I mean? So
Yeah. So did you speak to any mothers who'd been on probation previously? Were you able to get in touch with somebody who'd been through a similar situation? Because sometimes just speaking to somebody who's been through that situation can be a real help to you.
so fortunately for me, fortunately and unfortunately, but I had a family member who had been through the system many years ago, and she had been a very big part of my sentence in terms of making sure that I had the things I needed and stuff because she'd been through it. So she helped, but she helped in a different way. Because she'd been through it, she just supported me in the way that she would have wanted to be supported. So I didn't really have someone in that sense. It was more tough love in a sense, which was good. But on the other side of that, I had a young lady in the prison that I was in with before I came home, and her daughter went to the same school as mine. So we built a relationship that continued, that we're still friends today. But it got greater because of that. And I contacted the head of the school, and because that was hard again, going to the school and just doing the school run. One day I just start turning up at the school and no one knows who I am. That was, when you say, how do I feel? Those are the things that made me feel a bit like, oh my God, what do you do? How do you explain this? Where have you been? It was a lot. I never used to go into the school when everyone was there. I'd wait. I'd wait till the end. I'd pick her up, like not late, but like the last child. And then I started realizing that was affecting her because that was a routine she wasn't used to. Children, they like them up. They like you there on time. As the bell goes, they want to see you. So, it just made me feel all different types of things. I just kept thinking I was failing. When in hindsight, I really wasn't failing.
Yeah, you were just doing your best to try and maneuver and get things back on track.
But like my best is like, and even things like what she ate. I felt like I didn't know my own child. I felt like I didn't really know her, and I left the baby, and I've got this walking, talking person, just, So it was a lot to adjust to, and I don't think that my family understood how hard that was going to be either. I don't think anyone would understand unless you've actually been through it, and I think that's where the beauty of accountability comes in, because you can't just expect everyone to understand everything that you go through in your life. Do you get what I mean?
And in terms of your daughter, when you obviously once you returned, and it's great initially, but you've got to build that relationship back up. She's got to get into a routine with you. Did it affect her in any way in terms of her behaviour and how she was with you and how she was with your sister and your mom?
Yeah, it absolutely affected her. It's actually sad to talk about because the reality of that journey that she actually went through gets overlooked many times, in sometimes even not even a situation of probation. Do you know what I mean? Sometimes we feel like children are too young to talk to. However, they're doing so much. They're so advanced, especially this new age of children. So they understand. And so her effects were, so me coming home, the first effects was that she wasn't sure what was happening. So she didn't, my daughter never thought, it was never a thing like, oh, mummy's at work because I said that she was at work. She always used to say, mummy, you've got spiders in your work. She used to point on the business. She'd be like, mummy, you've got spiders at your work. So I used to just leave her with that narrative. But I feel like when I came home, she was concerned about me going back to work. So I went back to work full time, and her behavior started changing. She developed, she started wetting the bed, which is something that she'd never done. And it started to become quite bad. It continued for almost a year, to be fair. And that was due to the fact that she couldn't express her emotions about what she was feeling, about what was actually happening in front of her.
Yeah.
She ended up having to, she'd spent most of her life in one school. So she went to a school from reception. When I came out, I think she was just about to go into year 2. So she ended up having to leave her school halfway through the term You know, they all made a big card for her, you know, like, we're gonna miss you, because it was a lot bigger than what anyone had actually understood. Like, I didn't want to change her school. So let me just go back. When I was released, I was moved into a borough an hour and a half outside of where I grew up and where her school was. So I was doing a school run every day on the underground, and I was having panic attacks as well, because that was post-COVID and post-prison and post everything. Now I'm on an underground with all these people, and I'm confused because I was made to believe that this wasn't allowed. So it was a lot to deal with, but I have to take her to school. So I was taking her to school every day, and then it was too much. So I ended up getting her changed. So that change of school was new for her. So now you've changed area, you've changed school. You don't see your gran, you don't see your aunt, you don't see any of your family anymore. So every day it was like, Mummy, can you call grandma? Mummy, can you call auntie? You know, and there was nothing that I could do about that situation. And then she started to do this thing. She started to seek attention. So she used to go to the toilet and not flush the chain. And then I'd go and I say, all right, when you go to the toilet, you know, remember to flush the chain behind you, wash your hands and stuff. So yes, Mum, yes, Mum. And then she used to do it and say that she didn't do it. So I used to go in the toilet and see something in there and be like, did you flush the chain? She'd be like, I didn't go to the toilet. And it used to happen every day. And I used to say, but so where did it come from? And I used to clean my OCD. That's something, you know, it's got even worse since I've come home. But so I know that there's nothing. So it's little things like that. It was just little lies she used to tell. And then there was a situation with the school where she made a disclosure that I beat her with an axe. Which, yeah, I was at work. I got a phone call saying that my daughter had made a disclosure. And first of all, they said, you know, you don't have to come just yet. And I was like, what do you mean? Like, you're telling me my daughter made a disclosure about what? And there was like, and then they called me back and said that I should come to the school. When I went there was like 6 people in the room. And I went in there and I said, look, I'm just going to explain it to you like this. Before you say anything to me, I have just come out of prison. I have just been transferred from one borough to another. I've had nobody ask me anything about why this child has moved from this borough to here, to your school, and so forth and so on. And lo and behold, it wasn't an axe, it was a pair of tweezers that was being referred to. But it was just so much, it affected her so much that it just created so much other little problems. And, you know, like, I tried my best to create other relationships with her. Like, her dad, she has a very good relationship with her dad, so she started spending time with the siblings. But then this is a new relationship with her siblings, so these children are doing things like Minecraft, I think it's called, or whatever it is. So the children of the Minecraft, the knives and all this stuff is going on, and you're translating that back into the school now. And it was just crazy. So these are the things that used to happen. So what I did is I sat her down and I said, sorry.
No, it was just in terms of support again. Was there any support from the school? Was there any third party organisations that you could refer to? Because there's a charity at the moment who are, funnily enough, they're on here in April, called Children Seen and Heard. So they're doing a lot of fantastic work with the children of people who have either served a sentence or are currently serving a sentence. So in terms of that, they were based in Oxford initially, but I think they've spread out a little bit more now. But from your experience, would something like that really have helped you at the time?
Absolutely. That's something that I actually quite found. You know, like, social media is quite a big place. So you can find forums and places where you can find those spaces. But I didn't have the support. Nobody knew. And I feel like the only time I got more support is when I told the school what my situation was, because they didn't know. It wasn't explained to them.
Okay, so it wasn't communicated through them. So when you're, and again, we'll bring this back to probation. So your experience of probation, you had lots of support from your family, but there wasn't any direct support coming in from probation with you being a mother. So if you're gonna, you know, we've got probation practitioners on here, and some of which do a fantastic job. If they're supporting a mother who is on probation, what recommendations would you make to them in terms of, you know, your experience? How can that be more positive for the people that they're currently working with or about to work with?
I think one of the most important things is early engagement. I think definitely early engagement from before release, if possible. Also, if the conversation of what's going to happen with that mother on the day is just as important as the risk. because like I said, the community risk is now very high. As a mother in the community, it's higher than the risk of committing another crime. So that conversation like needs to be had on the first day. It's like, where are you going? You know, where are your children? What does that situation look like? Because it's just another bit of support, someone that understands, you know, what's actually happening away from the crime and stuff. It's like, look, I have to now go and rebuild my life as a mother. Having a support system around that area alone is important, away from the risk of the crime. Because once I got into those gates, there was no faults. There wasn't faults before, but there was definitely no faults about committing any crimes. Now I have to think about how am I gonna rebuild my life as a mother, and my daughter's gonna be 5 years old when I'm released. That was my thought process. It wasn't how am I gonna, you know, create a better life so I don't speak to the people that I committed the crime with. It was all about being a parent. So I feel like that needs to be focused on throughout the whole of the sentence, because you have to be a very strong person to, you know, be disciplined enough to tell yourself, you know what, I am a mother, I'm doing a sentence, and when I come home, I have to make sure there's things in place, mentally, emotionally, because it's hard, you know, it's very hard.
And what you mentioned there, I think, is of great importance in terms of using the sentence to prepare for life on the outside. And I think a lot of time people sit behind a door and they have a lot of time to think, and there are courses and there are education available, of course there are, but that doesn't happen for everyone. But that kind of planning and that liaison and engagement with probation and that preparation for coming out, and you know, I'm a parent, I'm you know, I've made mistakes along the way. It's a difficult task being a parent, and if you've been taken away from your son or daughter for a period of time, you've almost got to learn how to do that again. And times are changing, children are changing, methods are changing. It can be quite difficult. So from your point of view, in terms of your experience, you would recommend early engagement with all information on the table. You would recommend using a sentence as part of the preparation, which does happen in terms of being released. And then if you'd have had somebody like you to talk to, an experiential advisor at the time, do you feel that would have helped as well?
Yes, absolutely. Because I would have told, I'm a person, and I do it now. I tell people to take accountability. It's not all down to the responsibility of others. There is an element of accountability and responsibility. So it's like, as a mother, you're going into the system. You have to look at your child as a fly on the wall. In every day and everything that you do, your child is there. Because I was, like I said, I didn't start my sentence like that. It was very emotional. But once I remembered the goal was is the mother. I'm a mother before anything. Do you understand? Before any piece of paper that says I'm a criminal. So I had to remember that. So I feel like people that have been through it, like me, it's easy to explain those, because I've had experiences within the prison that can explain the hurts about not having your children but you have to take accountability for that. And it allows you to have a better sentence, a better life, a better understanding, a better future, and a better, you know, and a clearer path, a better communication with people, because you don't feel bad about yourself. A lot of this communication goes bad because of how people actually feel about themselves. I did it personally. I felt bad about myself. I walked into the probation office feeling like a bad mum. Like I felt like everyone was judging me. I just felt, you know, I felt all sorts of things that didn't need to exist. You know, so if I had someone that could stop me from feeling that at the point of sitting down with probation and be confident about, you know, where I'm at this point, then yeah, absolutely.
And I think that's a really relevant point. You know, within this St Giles Wise project, there are a number of experiential advisors, all with different experience. And the whole point of the project is to help and support, yes, people on probation and probation practitioners. And I think using somebody's lived experience is certainly a way of moving others forward and allowing them a platform to discuss things, because I can't imagine, and you've done fantastically well. You've come out of custody, you've rebuilt your life, you're working, you've got a great relationship with your daughter, and that, credit to you, that's not an easy thing. And I'm sure, you know, you'll have had your barriers and your hurdles along the way. But having a support network, whether that's from your probation practitioner, whether that's from somebody from something like Children Seen and Heard, or whether that's an experiential advisor, it can definitely help along the way. So for those of you that are working with mothers who are on probation, fathers who are on probation, then please get in touch, because the experiential advisors and their experience, as you'll have taken from this morning, is really invaluable.